Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We begin today's program with an in-depth look at a bird known for its intelligence, adaptability, and its loud caw sound. We're talking about the common crow, which are seen and heard throughout Vermont. Crows are extremely intelligent birds. They're known for their problem-solving and communication skills. While many crows are solitary, they will often forage in groups, especially during the winter. To learn more about crows, Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin visited with our bird expert, Audubon Vermont's Mark Labar.
Crows are fascinating, and it seems like, especially in the winter, their behavior is a little bit different. Tell me a little bit about them in general.
Well, crows are very intelligent birds. They're in the corvid family, so they're in there with ravens and blue jays. In the wintertime, they use a strategy of roosting in large numbers. Sometimes they can be in the thousands, where they'll all collectively hang together. They're very social by nature, so you can often see them right at the end of the day migrating or moving towards, I guess would be, to their communal roost sites. Oftentimes these can be in a city or close to the city. Crows like an open habitat, so lots of ag land. You usually don't find crows in the forest, so to speak, when you have straight up woods, because they like to use those fields for feeding. And oftentimes you find them in urban settings because the light from the buildings and just the city protects them a little bit, because their predators, great horned owls, will not come into the city when it's lit like that.
How is their behavior different in the winter than it would be at other times of the year?
Well, as they start to progress and as you get towards the breeding season, those big roosts will begin to break up. But again, because crows are very social creatures, they will often move in family groups. You will have younger birds, so birds that hatched and survived from the previous year or two will often help the adults in raising the next brood. So you can have groups of crows that'll, they'll set up a nest spot, and then a number of different crows moving back and forth to feed the young.
And what do they eat in the winter?
They're pretty omnivorous. They'll eat a little bit of everything. If there's snow cover, they might be forced to try to find some carrion that's already been, that's around, so something that might be dead. But as soon as the ground cover opens up, worms and insects, sometimes bird eggs, they're very advantageous. They'll visit dumps, agricultural fields. You can often see them moving through as folks, they plow the fields, or they're doing some planting. Somewhat notorious in that they'll actually pull up some of the seedlings, so they don't necessarily have a great reputation amongst the farmers, but a little bit of everything.
If somebody wanted to observe crows, where would they go?
It's interesting because crows seem to be a bird that you find pretty regularly. Often I can look out the window and I can see crows, but if you talk to a crow hunter, they can be actually very difficult to track down. Again, agricultural fields, areas that have some degree of openness. If you do know where a roost is, like a winter roost, you can visit that site too and be pretty much guaranteed that you'll be seeing the birds come in the evening.
How do they communicate with each other?
They have a lot of different sounds. Everybody knows the caw, caw, caw of the crow, but there's lots of different vocalizations that they'll use as well. So a pretty vast repertoire.
What are they trying to say to each other?
A lot of bird communication is just that, especially with a social creature such as the crows. So these different sounds that they make are often just individual birds staying in touch with other crows. And so we know that some birds like to sing in the springtime when it's breeding time and in the summer. But crow communication is a little bit more guttural, and these birds, they're just keeping in touch with their neighbors.
From late March through mid-April, pairs of male and female crows work together to make a nest. The female will generally lay 3 to 8 eggs, and both sexes will share the 18-day incubation period. The young chicks are born with their eyes closed but gain sight by their 5th day. The young crows are full-feathered at 4 weeks old, and they learn to fly by late June. Well, diversity in agriculture is important to Vermont's economy and working landscape. While dairying remains our state's largest sector of agriculture, there is continued growth in products like cheese, maple, and ice cream, and now mushrooms. Across the Fence's Keith Silva has our story.
Alien and strange, and yet familiar and earthy. Mushrooms are as unique as they are common. And they taste good too. Well, at least some people think so.
People are like, oh my God, I love mushrooms. Or they're like, ugh, I hate mushrooms. So you never find anybody that says like, they're lukewarm. You know, either you hate them or love them.
Where's the spawn, sweetheart? You want to get the spawn?
Monica Gallardo and her husband Jason Bednarz own Motown Mushrooms in Morristown. Bednarz is a jack of all trades. A carpenter and sometimes chef, he started growing gourmet mushrooms as a hobby and selling his crop to his fellow chefs. It didn't take long before demand exceeded supply.
Chefs always like the weirdest thing they can put on the plate, and so at least the better ones. And so if you can show them a product they've never seen before, or even better, their customers have never seen before, you get this wow factor. And so they're always interested in not only fresh and local, but completely new flavors and textures. As a carpenter, I often get slow come January, and usually when that happens, I launch into projects. And so the project that year was to build my flow hood and my big sterilizer to step up the mushroom growing game.
Growing mushrooms breaks down into 2 categories: propagation and cultivation. The flow hood Bednarz built in his basement allows him to work in a sterile, lab-like setting and produce specific varieties of mushrooms like oyster, lion's mane, and hen of the woods.
We start with Petri dish, which is agar medium, which is a nutrient medium, which allows the mushroom mycelium to grow, and that's sterile. As the mycelium grows, I check for contaminants. Once I have clean mycelium, I go to this sterilized grain, and that allows the mushroom mycelium to propagate out from the inoculation points and colonize the substrate. This I can expand into 10 more jars, and so I keep making what are called generations of grain spawn, and they get bigger by a factor of say 8 to 10 every time I expand it. And so it's a series of expansions, and you start with a small speck of mycelium and you grow it out to its physical limits, and then you use it to fruit mushrooms.
Saw something, an off-colored brown in here.
There's at least 10,000 species of mushrooms, and it's a constant process to learn more and more species.
Terry Delaney teaches the biology of fungi at the University of Vermont. Across the Fence followed Delaney on a mushroom foraging field trip a few years ago. The connection between fungi and humans goes back centuries to a time when mushrooms were considered the food of the gods.
There are documented fungi in the form of stone carvings from thousands of years ago. In fact, the Egyptian pharaohs even apparently consumed mushrooms. In fact, they were privileged to be the people who could consume mushrooms in their society.
Foraging for wild mushrooms continues to be a tried and true practice for finding favorite fungi. But commercial mushroom production has also ramped up in recent years because of how easy and profitable it is to grow mushrooms.
Many species of mushrooms are very easy to cultivate, and the oyster mushroom is a good example. It will grow on almost anything. I even saw a fella grow some mushrooms on an old t-shirt that he had inoculated. So that particular mushroom grows very well. It's also a very effective decay fungus in the forest, and we'll find that on decaying logs.
Oyster mushrooms have become the meat and potatoes of Motown Mushrooms' business plan, thanks in part to the Fungipale. Bednarz and Gallardo developed this grow-your-own kit, which packs mycelium and 8 pounds of pasteurized straw into a 2.5-gallon pail at $29.99.
Everything that the mushroom needs to grow is inside. In fact, by the time you get it, it's already well on its way to producing its first crop of mushrooms. So the mycelium will colonize that substrate, And when it finds the holes, it senses the light and the fresh air, and it'll begin to produce little baby mushrooms, which will rapidly expand over about a week to full size. And so, I mean, it's pretty hard. Our biggest problem with it is actually keeping them from fruiting before we can get them to the customer, because they are like little biological bombs. They will produce mushrooms no matter pretty much what you do over about 3 weeks from when you make it. And I've had friends that forget them in the trunk of their car or in their closet, and they've erupted into giant mushrooms.
The Fungi-Pails allow Bednarz and Gallardo to spread their love of mushrooms and to teach people how to grow their own food.
People are really looking to get first local foods, foods that are like really beneficial for you, and also they support small business. The fact that you can grow it your own, and you know that these mushrooms don't have any pesticides, they don't have any byproducts, anything like weird being added to them. You know where your food is coming from. I think people find that very valuable. We love teaching people how to grow their own mushrooms, teaching them about the advantages of consuming your own food. I love it. I never thought that I was going to be a mushroom farmer. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would be like, what? But I'm really into it now, and we really love it.
Watching mushrooms grow is still exciting even after all this time. It's so fast, they're so alien, they're so amazing in flavor. They're ridiculously efficient at converting cellulose into protein, which is like one of the big problems in nature, is what do you do with this woody cellulose material? And if it wasn't for mushrooms, we'd be buried in leaves and logs that never rot. And so they're this integral, poorly understood part of of nature, and it's great to be able to get in there and monkey around with it and experiment and see what does what.
From pails, on logs, or in the wild, fungi are apt to mushroom just about anywhere. What can we say? Fungi are fun and delicious. Well, maybe. In Morristown, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Keith. You can find out more about Motown mushrooms by visiting the company website. It's motownmushrooms.com. Or you can call the company at 802-851-8222. That's 851-8222. With spring's arrival, the mountain snow and ice begin to melt away, and Keith focused his camera lens on the change of seasons. As we say goodbye this afternoon, he offers this photographic look at some of the last vestiges of winter and the transition to spring. Enjoy. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.